Christina Madsen, and we are going to get started. Hershila Alous, SGA President, is not here, and so we're going to start with VP of Operations at SGA, Megan McAfee.
I'll duck out of the light. So thank you for having me, and thank you for offering SGA this voice. I'm going to go over a bunch. I have a list of all of our accomplishments that we've made so far this semester. So the first, and I apologize for my hoarse voice first off. The first thing that we did is we reenacted the Student Fee Advisory Committee, so that will be starting up very soon. They're in the preliminary phases of rewriting the memos and getting all of that information out. So be looking for that. We funded a bus for Bare Boots on the Ground to allow more students to travel to Houston over this past fall break. Yes. We updated and altered the swimsuit policy for the Hyper to allow for more gender-neutral language and for the Hyper staff to determine what is considered appropriate attire. So that puts the modesty level in an eye that is comparable to the students. We held an investiture reception for students to come mix and mingle with President Davis and First Lady Jenny. It was very, very enjoyable, and all the students really loved the cookies and meeting President Davis. We started our live stream of our Senate meetings. Right now it's only hearing. Our camera is broken, but anytime that you want to go back and listen to our Senate meetings, they're archived on our YouTube channel. It's UCA_SGA. And we had no SAFA appeals, which is the first time in years and years. That means that all organizations were completely satisfied with their allocation, so we had no appeals, which is awesome. We've been working with Kai Caddy through our outreach committee. He's with athletics, and we've created a video encouraging recycling to showcase during athletic games. It's a really cute video. It has both of our mascots, encouraging students, faculty, staff, anyone on campus to recycle. We've approved money to bring our Title IX speaker, Jeffrey Buckholz, on January 24th. He will have multiple presentations. The times are yet to be determined, but they will be shared. We hosted a Think Event tabling and gift presentation. This is where students can come and write out postcards thanking veterans on campus for their service that they give. And this gift will be presented as well as our resolution at the Veterans Day ceremony or celebration. And then we have also passed 2 resolutions, and I'll read those resolve clauses. So the first was the armed service resolution, which was, like I said, it's going to be presented at the celebration. It reads, therefore be it resolved that the Student Government Association of the University of Central Arkansas expresses its profound gratitude and appreciation to all the men and women who have served and are currently serving our nation in the armed forces. The second resolution that we passed last night. It was our DACA resolution, and it reads, therefore be it resolved, the Student Government Association at the University of Central Arkansas offers wholehearted support to students and those members of the community who are affected by the removal of DACA. So with that, we only have 4 Senate meetings left this semester, but we're looking forward to much more hard work and finishing the semester out strong. Thank you.
And if you have any questions, obviously just raise your hand and we can bring it back up if we need.
So sorry.
No, it's fine. So quick shameless plug real quick, because the UCA magazine is now out, so I want you to look around. It'll be around campus, it'll be in different locations that you can look for it, so we're very excited. So be sure to pick one up, and with that, we'll give it to Dr. Steve Dunphy. Come on up.
This light too, it's right in my eyes. I have fewer updates this time around because due to the investiture ceremony, one of our regularly scheduled faculty senate meetings has had to be switched around, and so we're in the process right now of collecting quite a bit of information and having quite the extensive meeting next week. But we were very fortunate to be involved in the process of the investiture and in celebrating and welcoming more officially President Davis and his family to the UCA community, and that was a really nice and special event. A few things that are ongoing. So you might remember that in the first campus talk I mentioned that this year on Senate we're working very hard to improve communications across various bodies that are involved in shared governance or involved in making decisions that are going to impact faculty, staff, and students. One of the things that means is that we have continued to work with Staff Senate and SGA. I think we talked about last time that we were going to be getting together to host a civility training as a group. We actually did follow through. We each contributed some funding to that, and we did a civility training to help us to work together and to communicate more. We also have been working on developing better interactions between co-curricular and curricular decision making. And one of the initiatives related to that, the promotional materials just came out today, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. There's actually going to be a faculty and staff version of the poverty simulation that Outreach and Community Engagement has traditionally hosted with the ADHE for community members who are interested in doing outreach into the community related to poverty. We discovered that this is something that a lot of faculty are already doing either through service learning or through peer consideration to students. Staff are also constantly engaged in practices of doing outreach to the students who are most in need, and we thought it would be a great idea to actually make this available and an option for faculty and staff to participate in as well. So that will be December 5th from 1:40 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. in the Caslin Ballroom. So people look out for more information about that as well. It's a great opportunity to get training in sensitivity and awareness of poverty issues on campus. In terms of what Faculty Senate's ongoing projects are within the Senate, we have 3 subcommittees that continue to focus their work. At the very beginning of the year, one of the subcommittees was primarily focused on doing the IST review process or contributing to that. That has now been done as the peer review team has already made it through. So that committee is currently working on advising best practices. We also have a Senate subcommittee that's focusing on restructuring sort of best practices for all of the different committees that exist on campus and making sure that we're continuing with appropriate shared governance, working really closely with Staff Senate again to make sure that those committees that actually involve staff members as well as faculty members as well as students are being controlled by the appropriate body rather than necessarily always coming through faculty handbook or faculty senate to get implemented. So that's an ongoing process as well. And we've also got a Senate subcommittee that is currently working on and assessing the best ways to make sure that we're being inclusive of our non-tenure track faculty. So there are lots of very specific sort of concerns for non-tenure track faculty related to the benefits that they receive, some of the protections that they receive, some of the recognition that they receive across campus. And so we're coming at that from a multitude of dimensions. We'll be getting an extensive report 2 days a week, actually. That's something we did a lot of work in the past month. So if you're interested in the work that they've produced, I'll be posting that up to the Faculty Senate website at that time too. So that's what's been going on, and we look forward to continuing to work closely together. We're also participating in the Veterans Day affairs, but I know that both SGA and Staff Senate have some specific remarks about that. So just know that we're here, we're supporting them too. We were involved in that process as well.
Please welcome Staff Senate President Erica Ribble.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. The Professional Development Committee is currently accepting applications for quarter 3, so it's going to be January through March of 2018. So as a reminder, staff members are eligible to receive up to $2,000 in a quarter, not to exceed $4,000 in a single fiscal year. The employee of the quarter for quarter 1 was announced last month, and the committee recognized Lauren Stout from the College of Business Accounting Department for her hard work and dedication. The employee of the quarter committee will be accepting applications again at the close of quarter 2. And as a reminder, the winners receive $150 in bear bucks, 2 tickets to the annual Night of Distinction ceremony, and a reserved parking spot for 1 quarter. The UC Veterans Day celebration will be held this Thursday at 1 o'clock over on McAllister Lawn, and the ceremony honoring the veterans will begin at 1:40 during this period. I just wanted to thank everyone who's on the Veterans Day Committee for all their hard work in bringing this community life into this. Staff Senate still needs volunteers to sign up as ushers for both basketball games and women's performance hall events. The time earned while volunteering is to be reported for the holiday parade. All full-time staff employees are eligible to receive this time, regardless of whether you're classified or non-classified. And we're required to submit 16 hours this holiday break. So Staff Senate provides these opportunities to allow staff members to offset their vacation hours they report for that period. Limited number of tickets are available, will be available very soon. We'll be looking for an email. The ticket proceeds help support the Angel Bear program, and Angel Bear applications close on Monday. So trees will be going up around campus next week. Be excited for that. And the gifts will be due back on December the 4th for anyone who would like to adopt an angel in that program. So as a reminder, Winter Feast would not be possible without the support of the Office of the President and Care Department. Thank you.
I know this is trying to get the air. I know you can talk.
They're just about.
Thank you. I'd rather you be cool, so I'll talk over the fan. I think I'll be all right. Several things. First of all, I want to acknowledge a couple of sad passings, and there are a lot of people that right now are at Dr. H.B. Hardy's. The ceremonies honoring and memorializing his life. Dr. Hardy, great faculty member and academic leader, thought leader, and UCA lover. I learned during my time, and I hate that missing that, but for all those that are representing UCA at that event, I know that that family is going to feel very much enveloped in the love of this campus because he meant so much. And then I also want to acknowledge, last night our College of Education had an incredibly special time that Mandy Fogg was a classmate and friend of a number of our College of Education majors and students campus-wide that passed here recently. And there was a memorial service. And it basically was that last night. It went from being just in her memory to being a service. And I think that people were powerfully moved, packed room over in the College of Education. And the thing is, students organized all that for that Fogg family. Students took the time to pull it together when that family was at a low point and just didn't have the energy to even think about how they would do that. And it just showed the caring spirit of the UCA community that our students just stepped right up into that void. And although that makes none of that easier, it certainly made it just a little better for a moment or two. And again, that Fogg family knows that they are very much loved by this campus as well. There was only one question that came to me in advance of this, and that was regarding the IST peer review. The question that came was the penultimate draft, if you will, has come into me. The team certainly provided opportunities that if there's anything that needs to be clarified, amplified, that we certainly can do that. But the question was, when will that be made available to any groups that are interested in seeing? One thing I want to do is I want to have the opportunity to be able to meet with the IST staff. I think it's only fair that they, as a division and department, get to see that first before colleagues all over campus. But I'm hoping to do that in just the next couple of days, working with Chris Davis and that team on identifying a good opportunity. So to the person that asked that question, very soon, I guess, is the answer to that. And if the question actually came from an IST team member, very, very soon is the answer to that question. So more to come on that. And then I appreciate it was amplified several times about Veterans Day this week. It's going to be an outstanding celebration on Thursday at 1 o'clock. I do encourage you to take the time to be out there. That's obviously one of those very important connections between our campus and our community, and it's going to be a very special opportunity for us to say thank you to some folks that they and their colleagues stepped up to pay the ultimate sacrifice, if that was what was called upon them. We need to honor that. Today I've got several things that are a little bit of a rehashing, but I feel it necessary because at the October board meeting I presented some information on enrollment, and it was kind of bang, 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 bang. There was no time to really delve into the context of how is that affecting our budget planning month to month, quarter to quarter as we look toward July 1. So if you'll bear with me, I wanted to quickly touch on some of those data points again, just so a couple of things, especially in terms of how what we see in the enrollment, especially in the freshman and sophomore class, will echo and impact us for several cycles to come. All of you certainly are aware that we have had 2 consecutive years where we've been on a decline in terms of the overall head count in the university. From a peak in fall of 2015 of 11,754 to, we were at 487 and then 350 in the 11,000s this last year. When you look at that though, one of the things I mentioned to the board that day was that the overall FTE figures don't show that same sort of up and down wild ride. They've been largely stable. And one of the things that we do think has happened over the last 3 cycles is that we're seeing a more traditional enrollment pattern. You might be down in head count one year, but you're flat or a little up in FTE. That means you've got students taking more hours. You've got less part-time students. That's generally what's happening in the data. So the FTE has not been quite as impacted. This is probably the number one thing for us to understand is it's the opposite of a bubble. This is the vacuum. I still don't know what our science, especially our physics faculty, would tell me to call it. The red line is the trend line in terms of overall freshman enrollment. Now that's not first-time freshmen. We're going to talk about first-time freshmen here in just a second. This is anybody that still, by our classification standards, is still classified as a freshman. So obviously, some people can be in that fall statistic that they started, goodness, I guess as much as 2 years ago, technically. We probably need to watch out for them. That's a big red flag if they're still freshmen after 2 years. But certainly, people that could take a fall, a spring, and then a following fall to move beyond their freshman classification. So as you can see, we've actually had 3 straight fall enrollment periods from a peak in fall of 2014 on that overall enrollment of freshmen to where we are the last 2 years, and we've largely leveled out. The line that I really want you to look to is this, and it's hard to see here. That's yellow, that's orange. The orange is the sophomore line. For the first time, we're starting to see the echo of that depression, okay? And what I'll predict is, I mean, unless we can really make major gains in terms of transfers, we're going to see that junior line, which is the yellow, it'll take a little bit of a dip next year, all right? And that's just, I mean, we would watch the schools in Georgia. You could see it as opposite of a bubble washing through, and you'll look up, and some of you have heard me talk about the fact that about 3 or 4 springs from now, there will be plenty of seats at graduation, because it'll be the last remnants of that little vacuum moving through the overall pipeline. But why are we encouraged? This is looking at just the overall enrollment in 3 different categories that to me are our canaries in the mine shaft, or are we heading in the right direction? The red line are the first-time undergraduate freshman students. Okay, so the person that truly is, they are at hour 0 and starting with us. It's typically what we think of when we think of what our first-time freshman class looks like. As you can see, 2232 was the peak back in fall of 14, and we went to 2044, 1880. Of course, this was during the time when we were making adjustments in overall standards. And then this fall, we went from 1880 up to 1937. That's the result of us really, I think, getting aggressive, messaging those higher standards. I think I'm looking Courtney's up in the corner. There are about 100 things that their office, along with all of your departments, because again, we're all in enrollment management. It's not just one unit. The work that we're doing to really target and attract that first-time freshman, we see encouraging signs. The yellow line are undergraduate transfers. Again, it was very encouraging that this year we went from 660 last fall to 742. I mean, that is an encouraging bump of, make sure my math is right here, I'm going to go back to remedial, 82 students more than we had this time last year that were new transfers. That can help offset some of that depression that's in there as we begin targeting folks that are sophomore and junior, and some of them I guess could be senior status when they're transferring in. And then we're also encouraged that our graduate numbers, they were actually predicted to be flat or down by many people that I looked to. We went from 526 to 545, so again, it was good to see those new entrants into our university, all 3 of those key categories being up. We were up in first-time freshmen, we were up in transfers, we were up in graduate students. But here's the thing that I really want to impress upon you guys. Some of you have heard me say in meetings that, and this is verbatim, I'm not going to breathe until we've got 3 fall semesters in a row that look like that, those sorts of trend lines. It's going to take 3 solid years with each of those 3 categories for us to offset that. All right? We've got to counteract that vacuum. All right? Instead of allowing a bubble to wash through, we've got to figure out how do we counteract it. And again, I don't think we'll go back to this. I mean, when you really look at it, it's almost as if in the last 2 years we didn't have roughly 450 students that didn't start with us that maybe historically would have. So in some ways we start thinking about, well, where are you going to in each year add 250, 270 students? How can we find 50 more first-time freshmen? How can we find maybe 75 more transfers? How can we find 40 or so more graduate students? Because obviously we very much want to manage that overall growth, but we certainly have programs that have room for growth. Not the ones that are capped, I know that, but we got some that have got opportunities for growth. But when we talk about where can we find 250 or so more students a year, that's where we get to that sort of 2% growth statistic that I think that we've got to have over 4 or 5 years for us to really get back to a long-term stable growth that allows us to plan for new resources, not just conservatively budgeting for flat growth, okay? Now, the reason I say we got to have like that 3 straight falls for that number to really get better, I think next fall we're probably going to have to budget very conservatively for no growth to modest growth, and I don't even know that we'll want, I'm looking at Diane Newton right now, I don't even think that we'll want to budget any growth statistic into the July 1 budget. There's always the opportunity to come back, but you don't budget growth until you've experienced it for a 10+ month period of time. That's what's been drilled into my head. We were flat this year. It was great news because our July 1 budget was in great shape. It was sound, but that didn't mean there was any new play with money. All right? That just meant that we weren't going to have to come back to you for any cuts during this year. That meant that budgeting conservatively July 1 was the right play, and we budgeted for flat, and guess what? We were effectively flat. Next year, we probably, July 1, will be budgeting for flat again, because that's just a good play to avoid having to do mid-year cuts. But we do see encouraging statistics in that enrollment. Some people will hear me say budgeting for flat or not budgeting enrollment growth, and hear that as me saying that I don't think that we're going to grow. Those are 2 completely different views of where we are in terms of overall enrollment. Does that make sense? Then there were some other things that I included in that board meeting that were just priorities, and I'm mindful of time because I know we've got Q&A. You know, I really impressed on the board that, you know, these are big bucket priorities, but the improvements in the enrollment, what we're doing to really isolate on first-time freshmen transfers, paying attention to the 30, 60, 90 marks, that if you really want to understand what the new funding formula is about, it's still about enrollment, but it's about, are you getting students through checkpoints? It's almost like for universities, your enrollment with the state doesn't really count until you get to about 60 hours. And that doesn't put Arkansas in any sort of special place. It's been like that in Tennessee and Oklahoma for years because they had a more performance-driven formula and outcomes formula. Georgia was beginning to drift toward that. The retention and graduation rate closure, some of you may remember I put some statistics in that looked at where we were. We're about 9 or 10 points shy of where Fayetteville is in terms of fall to freshman to sophomore retention, and to me that becomes our goal. Let's track them down and begin closing those gaps. And then depending upon how you cut it, we're either 2nd or 3rd in overall graduation rate, I guess, to A-State. But again, not a number that's insurmountable and looking to fail. But the last bullet there, and this is where your work this year, a lot of you are looking at, as the Strategic Planning Committee and the Strategic Budgeting Committee are asking each department to look at your resources and look at the zero-based budgeting process through how does that align with the overall strategic plan of the university. Central to that strategic plan are our student success initiatives and those things that are focused on what are we doing to recruit, retain, and graduate students. So I'll be really interested in what's coming out of that budget discussion about what the departments are doing to align resources. And sometimes that's not money, sometimes that's just time toward those student success goals. So there's a lot of fruit to come from those discussions that you're now actively involved in. Some other things that now set in motion, we at the beginning of the year knew that we needed to get to a more aggressive scholarship calendar. We don't need our students and families to be waiting until February to know about scholarship offers. Those conversations are all over the shouting at the new year. I mean, so we want to get that in hand for students by no later than the middle of December. I appreciate that housing, I mean, has moved up their dates a little bit earlier because, again, students with choices have choices. So we need to get as much information in their hands as possible. We're becoming even more intentional with our 2+2 partners. As a result of us becoming more selective, we're denying more students. Well, the reality is, if we know that there are about 4 schools, community colleges, 2-year schools, that those students are going to land at. So how can we become even more intentional, not only about having 2+2 arrangements, but I appreciate some of the early work that's being done by some colleagues here in the room on really thinking about gateway programs that extend some of the services that we already do for our existing students. Why couldn't those be for students that are enrolled in those 2+2? They have every intent in coming back to us. It cost us nothing, but there's services that we could extend to them. So we're working on things like that, and the work in Dallas, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Memphis, we do know certainly fruitful as we look to the future. We're excited this year about the computer engineering, engineering physics, and cybersecurity. Those are sort of a little nest of areas that they really broaden our comprehensive nature of the university. We like to say that we're a comprehensive university. Having those degree programs in our toolkit certainly help us to be able to promote that. Making certain that those programs get off to a good start is certainly a major priority of this year. I appreciate on the experiential learning focus. What that is, a lot of you heard me talk about that I think that undergraduate research and study abroad and community service learning and internships, things like that are what really round out a student's overall academic experience. It's the difference maker when we want to say that what you can get here at UCA is different and special relative to all the other universities that you can go to. It's not just what we're doing in the classroom, but what we can do to allow students to channel their enthusiasm and their passion for their academic discipline in the world. It's through those sorts of vehicles. So I appreciate the staff that are and our team that are working on really inventorying all our existing efforts. Sometimes when you take a step back, you appreciate all the things that we're already doing and how can we supplement some of those areas. And then the focus on fundraising during the year. I think, just like I said, everybody's involved in enrollment management. You'll appreciate this. Everybody's involved in fundraising. As we start working toward capital campaign in this next year and land the work for what will be probably 6 to 7 years of really heavy lift by our campus. We know that professional development opportunities, for our various departments that are going to need to be involved with that. We need to be taking a hard look at where are those real opportunities in our donor base to help us with some of the capital needs on the campus. We have a consulting firm, Dennis Ferris, that's helping us to be able to ascertain where that tolerance level is in that donor base, what would be a good overall target, and where they're good projects. But we also know that we've got to put more and more time to that. New state money is not coming anytime soon, here or in the other 49 states. And we also have to be very wary about just passing on tuition increases to our students. Some of you heard me talk about it this way. I mean, $500 more may as well be $50,000 if you're poor. So we have to be very mindful of every dollar that we pass along to students, that is going to have an impact. It creates a barrier to participation. So the reality is we've really got to double down, probably triple down the efforts in terms of overall fundraising, and that's something that I'm obviously committed to, and appreciate Dr. Kelgover and his team, the commitment that they are making to that. But as importantly, know that you're going to find yourself in the center of that, because you never know when you may be the person in a department who that donor is really interested in knowing about. Not because they know you, but because somebody that made a difference when they were a student here 50 years ago, they were in that department, and they're kind of interested in what's going on in that department in this day and time. At that point, it's not about me, it's not about Kale, it's about you, because they really want to hear from you. Fixed capital priorities. One thing that we are planning to do, hopefully at the December board meeting, is to be able to present and have the board to be able to basically approve what the broad capital outlay priorities are on the academic side, as well as what the broad capital outlay priorities are on the auxiliary side. That is being informed by what we're learning from the consulting engagement on the capital campaign, but there certainly are great needs. those of you know about the health sciences building, arts, and renovation of former science, and renovation of education. There are all sorts of possible projects out there. What we're hoping to be able to do is put that, so that sort of becomes a very public list that we can begin working through. And then the last thing is just to remind you, and this is for every single department, we know that we've got gaps in terms of our salary. All right, there's some places where we're severely behind market, and there's some places, actually a few places where we're a little above market. What we're wanting to do is to make certain that whether it be for faculty, non-classified, classified, all right, any particular position, that we're doing the best job that we can to try and align you with peers, not only here within the state of Arkansas, but in the Coupa data, in the classified salary data set that the state maintains. We want to make certain that we're looking at that from an objective standpoint and being fair and drawing conclusions about what the overall pool is. Because what we want to do for the board is go to them and say, you know, to get to that average or get to that target, I mean, that's another $4.2 million, and it probably is a number. That may be low compared to what it's going to be. But we're not going to solve all that in one cycle, but we can then begin talking with the board about how can we start chipping away at that. To maybe develop a 3 to 4 year cycle where we start making some significant penetration toward that goal. And maybe look up to where instead of being very much making up a number, 17% off, that we can close that gap within a couple of cycles to be down within single digits and making some real progress. That is the goal of that project. And again, the board likes that because they hear from everybody, especially our local board members. They hear from everybody about the need. But what they want us to be able to do is to be able to have an organized, systematic process to be able to allow them to weigh in on that with the July 1 budget if we've got the resources available. So that's the purpose of that project. And again, I appreciate the work that a lot of you have done, especially as Graham and Amber and others have reached out to you about coming up with peer comparisons, who would be good targets. That is all coming to a head where hopefully that will manifest itself. It'll probably be a shoulders down sort of moment because we're going to realize what the overall magnitude is. But we've got to have the courage to start getting at it and to start eating that elephant a little bit at a time. So that's kind of, I wanted to just touch on that because I felt like at the board meeting, a lot of that was thrown out, and I didn't want people to think that was just a conversation that I have just with the board. It's very much, it's relevant. That's almost like a work agenda for this fall and heading into next spring. And when I think about it, when I talk, whether it's externally or internally, about what are those things that really come to mind that I'm worried about day to day, that's not all, but that's 90% of it. It's certainly what are we doing to organize ourselves toward, again, ultimately a lot of those things that lead toward our abilities to position ourselves for enrollment growth, because that's where most of the resources are going to come from. So I'll leave you with that as just kind of a reminder, and my apologies for being redundant for those of you that have heard that 10 times. Yeah. Sure. This one? Yeah.
I don't know, question.
Oh, okay. Some pondering going on down. Questions about that? Yes.
What is the impact of the graduating high school with the AP classes? The reason I brought it up is I have a grandson that says he's got like 40-something hours of AP classes. How is that affecting our incoming freshmen, and is it, if they go up to coming in as a sophomore, I mean, you know?
Well, if they come in with that many hours, they're one more in that orange line. Does that make sense?
Have we seen the trend going to that? Since
Well,
AP classes
you know, we certainly are seeing more and more. I'm going to answer this generically because the same thing's happening here in Arkansas. It's true in Georgia, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. I mean, you're seeing a lot more students coming in with different sources. Some of it is AP credits that they've taken. Some of it is the concurrent and dual enrollment. That's certainly been a priority for a lot of families. And then a third category are just really savvy students that know how to club out of the entire freshman year. but that's been true since like 1951. One thing that I would say is it's gone from savvy students and savvy families to it's been a democratization of those opportunities. That's what we saw in Georgia, that the systems were now working with families to allow that to happen instead of the system working against families and allowing only the savvy families to figure it out. That's where it was about 20 years ago. Is that fair, kind of looking to Courtney and others?
There's definitely been an increase in concurrent enrollment. I'm sure everybody's familiar with Greenbrier and then providing an associate's degree through their program. So we are seeing a big growth in overall concurrent programs and concurrent credits bringing in. However, students that receive those credits through their dual enrollment, they're still classified as first-time freshmen or counted in our overall first-time freshman head count. Though they may be classified as sophomores, they'd be counted in our first-time freshman head count, if that makes sense. I would say that we're starting to see a trend where the state, as Dr. Davis said, is starting to work with these families. I know for the lottery scholarship, for example, there is a progression in the amount of money that they get. So it's $1,000 their first year, $4,000 their second year, $4,000 and $5,000. It's only been recently where if a student comes in at a sophomore level that they can forego that first year and come in as a sophomore level and get it for $4,000 when they first get here. So I think that we're starting to see that the state is working more with these students, and that's a trend that we're going to continue to see in the coming years.
Do we have any feedback on the percentage that actually get that degree? Has it been around that long?
No, is Amber in here? She's not. It's a good question. I don't know if the state has done any evaluation of the impacts on accelerated enrollment opportunities on degree recipients. But that's a great question. We'll have to mark that one down and ask. Yes, thank you.
Can I follow up on that?
Oh, sure.
Well, that seems to me that will be a good thing for us if we have students come. They can accelerate through it, certainly get out in 4 years. Won't that be good for state funding as the new formula has it?
Yes.
Okay.
And here's why. I mentioned for the universities under the new formula, it's almost like the state doesn't reward the universities until the student is to that 60-hour mark. The same thing is happening with the Arkansas formula that was happening in Georgia. It's an incentive for universities to bring as many of those students in and honor those hours, because that puts them at a point where they count. Now I think you got to make certain that those students can perform. Make certain that they're really ready. I will not mention the high school. I will not mention the university that they partnered with to get it. But I met with a family not too long ago that was a little worried that she had gotten out over her skis, if you will, in terms of the credits that she had on paper, and she was interested in talking with our science advisors about what courses she should go back and retake, because she was a little worried about not foregoing that base freshman biology class and base freshman chemistry, but being as far along because she was not quite certain that the second, third level courses that she was getting credit for were up to snuff. And I was credit to that young woman and probably her mother and father for making that observation, because that's knowing yourself and not finding out that when you get in over your head. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I know you mentioned pulling in students, undergrads from different areas across Arkansas. Has there been any conversations about graduate programs from students from, say, Arkansas State who's thinking about going to Fayetteville? Like, what's the difference between our programs, graduate programs here at UCA, instead of going to Fayetteville, or students out of state looking to come in?
I'd probably have to call upon any graduate program coordinators to really do that. I would agree. I think I'm very proud of the graduate programs that we have. I would lay them up against any of those schools you just named, but I think that's your recruiting and your competitive advantage and your talking points about why a student should come here, as opposed to one thing. It's certainly more cost effective, I think, to come here than certainly to maybe to go out of state or to a higher price institution. Program by program, one of the things that a goal during this year is to make certain that the existing graduate programs that we have, that we're at a nice healthy investment level in them. I worry just 8 or 9 months in, I mean, you know, you program by program, are we following through on the commitments that we made when we proposed those graduate programs to begin with? Many of them are not very old, so several of them are less than 10 years old. I can think of 2 or 3, they're probably 5 or less years old. I'm kind of interested in looking back to those original program proposals and then seeing, you know, what did the university really do in terms of following through with what were stated as the investments in those. So that's something that with the provosts and the deans, and that'll be kind of a fact-finding conversation for me, but it certainly sets up, you know, where there's some places that we need to invest a little more than we've been in. And again, sometimes it's not money, sometimes it's clearing the way, removing policy barriers. Other questions? Yes?
How aggressively are we going after these high school seniors? I had recently on Friday, about 12 or 13 students came from St. Mary. They were all high school seniors. And I asked them, where are they thinking about going? Most of them said Fayetteville. A few of them said Hendrix. None of them said UCA.
What did they say after they spent time with you?
I think they said they'll start thinking about it.
There you go.
They were not aware of things that we can provide them.
Absolutely.
So somehow that image is not out there. We need to do something about it.
100%. And you had told me that day that you were having those students on. Exactly what you were doing, having those outstanding, it was all females, yeah, they were all STEM oriented or interested students. I think having those opportunities to get those outstanding students on our campus and let them see what they can do, not only with you, but the undergraduate research opportunities that are here, the connections to those graduate programs, that is exactly how you turn that tide, that conversation. I'm a big believer in recruiting opinion leaders out of high schools. I mean, if you can get that one really outstanding, you know, student, and then maybe get an outstanding student leader, and then maybe you have, you know, somebody that's you know, been very involved in volunteerism. You sort of have this sort of picture of here's the type of student that we think has you know, interest in UCA, and let's see if we can't get more. But you probably, with those 12, I'm betting 6 of them went back probably with a renewed thought, and that's pretty good, because when you first asked them, 0 of them had UCA. So it's a little bit at a time. If it were easy, everybody would do it. Yeah. You just buy it in a can. But enrollment management's hard. It's a heavy lift, and the bad thing is 9 things in a sequence of 10 can go right. All it takes is 1 going wrong to lose the student. Does that make sense? So it really is. It's minding P's and Q's, and dotting I's and crossing T's. Let me end with this. Just a couple things to brag on. These are letters that showed up on my desk this morning. They came like probably yesterday's mail. About 2 recent attaboys, attagirls that our campus got. One was associated with the C.D. Wright Women's Writers Conference that was just held this last weekend. Got fans already. For those of you that were not among the 129 people that were there, be there next year. This was, and I don't think she'd mind, this was from Nan Snow. I'll do a little bit in here, I won't read to you, it's her personal thoughts. But when I first approached Dean Terry Wright about the idea for a Women's Writers Conference, he said immediately, let's do it. This was quickly echoed by Associate Dean Gail Seymour and by the faculty, staff, and students of the Creative Writing Program. And she goes on to say, from the day Sandy Langhorne was named as director, she's devoted time to making sure that this first conference was a success. This was confirmed last weekend when a large number of women writers from throughout the country, I think there were 25 states represented, and this was the inaugural, 27, excuse me, plus 2, we're going to 27. So, a number of women writers from throughout the country gathered on campus and enjoyed a weekend of education and fellowship. Their kudos for the conference has been inspirational. Appreciate UCA's leadership and support in the founding of this conference. And here's what I love in her work. It's truly a mark of the university's devotion to academic excellence and to innovative ways in pursuing this excellence. I mean, I so appreciate anything. And then another one, I'm going to open up the mail more. Things like this. They're not always this nice. This one is about the recent Bare Boots on the Ground. And this is just from a gentleman that came in contact. It was, you can tell he wrote down a lot of students' names because he named and numbered them in the letter. Not only did your students, and this was with the group that went down to Houston to help with cleanup, they used their spring or fall break kids. Not only did your students leave numerous homes cleaned and prepared for restoration, they also buoyed the hearts of many a homeowner with energy, optimism, and in some cases, spiritual encouragement. UCA students also impressed me and the other volunteers with their integrity, work ethic, perseverance, respectfulness, and courtesy. I saw that in every UCA student I was privileged to collaborate with, but then he goes to name a bunch of them. I'll share this with you guys. You will know all the students by their first names. Furthermore, all of us were impressed by your students' selflessness, diligent work under difficult circumstances, and teamwork on a project bigger than themselves, especially because each of them sacrificed their fall break to help absolute strangers, many of those storm survivors that are now practically destitute. And then here's his closing statement, which I love. The combination of academic excellence and life experiences facilitated by UCA bodes well for your students and our world. Love that. That's the work we do. I mean, that's what we're about. And those are the flags we put in the ground. That's the quality that we're about, and that's the difference that we want to make. If there are no other questions, do you have anything else? All right. Thank you very much for coming today. Appreciate it.